morning and welcome everyone to episode, are we on 181? I lost track of our episodes.
183? I don't know.
183. We're way up there. It's difficult to keep track, but it says we've been live for 1 minute and 27 seconds. I don't know how we've been live for that long, but that's confusing. So I have my regular co-host, Ian Kummer, streaming live from a suburb in Moscow. I have our special guest, Greg Rosen, streaming live from Chicago, Illinois. Thank you guys both for joining me. Our title for this morning's episode is Will God Emperor Trump Annex Greenland? And it's a little bit of hyperbole there, but obviously everybody who has a pulse is familiar with Trump's threats to, take Greenland, and it should be part of the United States. He presented a map that had the stars and stripes covering Greenland. It's in North America. Just because some guys in a boat landed there hundreds of years ago, that shouldn't constrain us. We're the USA. It should be ours.
So, guys, in reference to the title, it was actually my idea this week. I'd scheduled the live stream this week, and I picked, Will God Emperor Trump as a reference to actually the tabletop game and franchise in general, Warhammer 40K, for those of you in the audience who know that, and it's set in the future. And there is a god emperor, this superhuman who is immortal, and he rules all of mankind. And actually, the thumbnail for this show is a Photoshop of Trump's face on his body that shows Trump. And so I just thought that was a bit of humor. It shows that, it's like, will the Emperor Trump just decide, we know what, Greenland belongs to us, we're annexing Greenland. And so that's the backstory.
I did not know that reference to Warhammer 40K. I'm familiar with the computer game. There's tons of Warhammer, 40K computer games. But I just took it like, Trump is definitely, thinking of himself in those terms, right? Like he kind of thinks that he is the global emperor and that he, ought to be able to do what he wants. But
and Condor, the bird, or one of our commenters said, I thought it was a reference to Dune. Well, it actually probably is a reference to Dune because Warhammer 40K is a game that started in Britain. It was a company called Games Workshop that started producing these plastic figures in the 1980s. And so they probably were thinking of Dune as one of their inspirations. So yes, Paul Atreides is probably one of the people they were thinking of when they created that.
I think that we're expecting, is it part 3 of Dune coming out soon? I'm not, it's pretty soon. Anyway.
Yeah, we had part 2 already, which I was disappointed in, honestly.
Yeah.
There was a mini series. I forget which network it was on, but there was this mini series that I watched. I think it was like in the early 2000s that it came out. It was really good. It was better than the 1980s version. It was better than the new one. It was the best version of Dune I've seen so far.
I just remember Sting being in the original Dune. He was the one of the princes that you had to get the slow blade to pierce the shield was how Sting ended up dying. Okay, so we're getting a little far afield here. To me, to contextualize the events of the last few weeks, we just really see this overt effort to drive a wedge between, Europe and the United States. And you see Trump doing all these overt things unnecessarily to antagonize, the Europeans. And then we had the Davos summit, which was big news. And some of the biggest news from that was the Prime Minister of Canada, Carney. He kind of, told the truth, which is rare, just explaining how, the imperialist system actually works and how, these various countries, buy into it if it benefits them. But, he made the point that, when this, Western imperialist system ceases to be of benefit to us, we're going to have to rethink things. Kind of a threat to, the God Emperor of the empire. So, it's interesting to conjecture exactly what is going on, and I mean we can't lose sight of the fact that China. I mean, again, I harp on this constantly, but China seems to be, the big the big deal, behind all of this, right? So to me, the battlefield is being shaped for a future pivot to China and a future, standoff with our peer rival, with the West's peer rival, and they're shaping the battlefield in order to give themselves the best advantage and fighting from the most advantageous ground when they are ready. Could be 5 years from now, could be 1 year from now, to really attempt to take down China, implement an energy embargo. But obviously, if you control Middle Eastern oil and Iran no longer can sell to China, if you control, Venezuelan oil, you control Mexican oil because, you have threatened them enough. And so you can control the oil supply, you could implement an embargo, and, you can really leverage that and work to get concessions from China, or just attack them and weaken their economy. So, to me, all of this is in preparation for, it's strategic sequencing in preparation for a future conflict with China. And so I kind of take this big split between Europe and the United States with a grain of salt. And I kind of see that, Trump is doing all these unnecessary things to give the pretense of disunity. But again, at a point in time in a year or five, there will be a united Western effort to really go after China, is my suspicion. Anyway, so that's my morning diatribe.
Well, I don't know if it's Trump, like you said. I notice, and I see all these hysterical liberals like on Substack, on Facebook, and these other networks, talking about how it's Trump working for Russia to divide Western unity. I don't know if it's all that.
Yeah, I
even
think that's a flawed
2021,
analysis.
even 5 years ago, even before the war in Ukraine and all that happened, I was saying, that the U.S. considers the European Union a competitor. It's not a friend, it's not an ally, it's a competitor.
Right.
And the past 20 years, we've seen the USA incrementally dismantling Europe as an economic center of the world. In the early 2000s, I forget which year it was like the early 2000s, like 2003, 2004, the European Union actually was close to equal in terms of nominal GDP to the USA, which is, which, just in, I know there's other ways to measure that, but, just in terms of raw economic power, it's interesting. The European Union at one time was equal to the USA, and now it's around half the GDP.
Oh, wow.
Which is remarkable. And so they've been very successful in attacking economically. Even if you look at like Emmanuel Macron's personal track records, there was at this point in 2014 when the USA was actually attacking France's energy grids. They wanted General Electric to make this large buyout of French energy, and they did to essentially blackmail France into accepting it. They actually arrested one of the French businessmen who was in there under the. I guess he wasn't a government employee. He was in the corporate sector, but he was tied to their energy sector. He came to the USA. They just arrested him on accusations of something like corporate money laundering or something like that, and it was very clearly just an attempt to bully France into accepting it. And it was really interesting. The French Minister of Energy resigned, and his replacement was Macron, who accepted the deal for General Electric to buy out a large portion of France's energy. So I'm sure there's many other examples of just incrementally
Yeah.
taking, bite-sized chunks out of Europe's economy and self-sufficiency. But the big blows were decoupling them from Russia, the cheap energy, because Russia was selling almost at a loss these energy. And it was for them, because when people scream about, Putin is weaponizing energy, it's hysterical, but at the same time, it's a correct statement to say Russia was using energy as a diplomatic tool. It's like, hey, if we break even, we give all this energy to Europe, but we're not really profiting from it, but we're basically breaking even on it. Mm-hmm. It improves our diplomatic standing with these Western countries that we want to trade with and have a good relationship with. So by severing that and then blowing up Nord Stream 2, that just shows that, the Russian idea of having that relationship and this pan-European of Russia and Western Europe and Central Europe all being one economic entity. Because if Russia and the European Union and Great Britain were not adversaries, if they were just one economic bloc, they'd be stronger than USA, they'd be stronger than China, they'd be stronger than everybody else. They'd probably be stronger than China and the USA combined. Because if you look at, because Europe, the European Union is like something like 700 million people. They have a huge amount of farmland. They're very, I don't want to say they're industrialized, but they're very, there's a lot of urban developments there. And you have Russia, which has 150 million people, which is not, it is the most populous country in Europe. And they have all this energy. They have all this infrastructure. If you put the two of them together, there'd be no way to attack them. What could you do? Think about what could the USA do to Europe if they just had unlimited Russian energy? They had, if Russia and the EU were just partners and they're just one bloc.
Yeah, and that's always been NATO's declared intention and purpose, right? Is to keep Russia out, Germany down, United States in, and so. But it's interesting what you were saying, because it's absolutely correct that Russia was interested in having a good economic relationship and being it's like the world that was promised to them before the Soviet Union was dismantled was, hey, we'll just live in this liberal utopia. We'll have peace and prosperity, and we will no longer be enemies. We'll integrate. We'll do economics. We'll trade, and it'll be great. We'll respect your sovereignty. Liberalism. That was the lie that was sold to Gorbachev and Yeltsin, and of course, it never happened, because it was a lie, and the United States was just hell bent on destroying Russia, balkanizing Russia. And we have seen those efforts, ever since the, dismantling of the Soviet Union, gobbling up 13 former Soviet satellite republics, marching in, overthrowing the government of Ukraine, putting in this ultra-nationalist, virulently anti-Russian government, and then unleashing them on ethnic Russians in Ukraine. So, we know the history. What was the point of my retelling that history? At my age,
you were just responding to me saying that, it was keeping Germany down and Russia.
Well, Russia and China are interested in good relationships. They're not pursuing global hegemony. They want to exist in a country that respects sovereign rights and that, has peace through mutual prosperity. That's what they're interested in. And it is the West that is driving conflict, the West that can't stop trying to destroy these countries. That's the dynamic that's going on here. So, it remains to be seen how serious this split is between, the European Union and the United States. Of course, the European Union has suffered, they're like the junior partner, in the mafia. And when the mafia Don tells them to do this, they have to do that, or they're going to suffer the consequences. But at some point, Western Europe, ultimately, is their allegiance ever going to be to Russia or to China, or is their allegiance always going to be to their fellow mafiosos in the United States? And the United States, of course, is counting on the fact that these countries aren't going to ever side with China. When the United States finally turns its attention to China, they know they can count on their fellow junior partners in the global mafia to support them. And so this is all kind of just, again, I see it as setting the stage and shaping the battlefield for this future. And so part of shaping the battlefield, of course, is Ukraine, weaponizing Ukraine, putting all kinds of, did I say Ukraine? I meant Greenland. Sorry. Greenland, which is the topic of our program, is, weaponizing Greenland, putting all kinds of military there. And because if the location, the geographic location of Ukraine is strategic. Greg, we have been talking over you and not letting you get a word in edgewise, and you are our special guest. And I know you have thoughts on what we've been discussing. Also, other things that you might want to bring up. But anything you'd like to let us get you. We will let you have a word in edgewise.
Yeah, just first thought is, I think after Davos, the split is officially healed, right? I mean, the way it's, as I understand, working out is Denmark is completely sidelined and Trump is negotiating with NATO over its head.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone seriously was under the impression that, they were going to invoke Article 5 and, have the rules-based order come against the USA, because, the USA is 80% of NATO's conventional combat power, and aside from France, which has its own native, which I actually think, correct me if I'm wrong, is the only other NATO country that has their own native nuclear program. Even Britain does have some nukes, but they're hand-me-downs from the USA. What were they going to do?
Well, they stopped the pretense of conflict. I mean, up until Trump got there, they were talking economic measures, potential military measures.
Well, even before,
obviously, yeah, there's nothing they can do realistically, but the whole kind of architecture of conflict disappeared.
Well, Trump threatened sanctions, and those 15 German soldiers, I guess, got back. They boarded a plane and came to Greenland, and then Trump tweeted on Truth Social, "I'm going to sanction anybody who is against me in the Greenland dispute," and then they got back on a plane and went back to Germany.
The two Finnish soldiers, I think, have gone back as well.
Well, it's like Putin, if you remember what Putin said before, I think it was even before Trump took office, is after he won the election. It's just like, someone had prompted him to ask, "What do you think of, Trump?" And he just said, everybody's, the Europeans are just going to be like a dog at the master's feet, gently wagging his tail. And that's what happens. They made all these threats. That's the thing with the Europeans. I mean, they're so noisy. They make these big, grandiose statements, but then at the end of the day, they just capitulate and do what the USA tells them. It's
right.
Pitiful, actually.
Well, Trump appeased him a little bit and said he's not going to take the whole thing by force or buy it.
Yeah, I mean, do we know if there's a deal in place? Are they still negotiating?
They're still negotiating.
Yeah, they're sending, the real estate crew plus Vance, right?
Well, they are negotiating real estate, so that makes sense. I did see that Dust said it was good to see Greg, and then he definitely omitted me and Ian. So I do notice that, Dust. I'm just kidding. I'm sure he's glad to see all of us. Okay. National liberation here is far more pressing than a conflict among the imperialists. There's multiple angles and multiple issues going on simultaneously, and it's a complex world, and things are happening so quick. It is very difficult to know even how to enter into the discussion, and much less explain the totality of it.
Well, just briefly, I mean, there's inter-imperialist conflict, as Ian was saying. You know, Europe and the U.S. are competitors, and the U.S. has been kicking butt. But you know, Dusta's right. These are indigenous people on Greenland who were close to independent from Denmark and having sovereignty, which, you know, this threatens completely.
Well, how many are indigenous and how many are just, you know,
there's less than 1 million, right? Like, how many in Greenland? Is it less than 1 million people?
I'm sure it's less than 1 million. It's
50
like,
some thousand, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very small population.
And then
most
what
of them
percentage were
native,
like Europeans? And then Europeans, and then what percentage were native? I'm not
I'm
certain.
sure the majority are probably Europeans, just because
that's what I assumed.
It's the opposite. The majority's natives.
No, that's interesting. I did not know that.
They're Inuits. They're like Eskimos, I think.
Okay. And so they were trying to, you know, they were pushing on the road for you know, having sovereignty and not being part of Denmark.
I don't know if a place like Greenland can ever really be sovereign, because, you know, you need to be a part of a larger economic.
Thank you, Ian, for sharing the colonial mentality with everyone.
Oh my gosh! Right.
Well, they have.
I know it's not liberal.
Right
very
now,
anti-liberal. I know. Like Russia should actually be, 50 different indigenous countries. The Balkans should be, 12 different countries. Even the USA should be, 50 or 60 different smaller. I know it's very trendy to say every large economic grouping should be balkanized into something smaller. China should be 50 different countries. It's very popular to say. I think I could actually define the last 80 years of political history, that because over time people naturally, small groups naturally consolidate into big groups, right? Because France, Germany, especially Germany, Italy, Russia, were not Russians or Italians or Germans or French. 600, 700 years ago, they were multiple different statelets, and before that they were tribes. And now no one remembers what those tribes were. They just consolidated into larger identities. But now, one defining characteristic of liberalism, of wokeness, is saying, oh, look at, East Turkmenistan, look at these, or Kurdistan, look at these little, national identities that are supposed to be sovereign. And that means breaking up those countries that they're a part of. Every ethnic group should have their own state. Every sub-ethnic group should have their own state. And it's a tool to delegitimize the state in adversarial.
Yeah, no, that can definitely be weaponized. What are your thoughts, Greg, on that aspect?
I don't know how that applies to Greenland per se, because it's, kind of unified as a region of Denmark that has self-rule.
Well, it has self-rule, but if we said it's like, hey, Greenland, I mean, it's one of those things. I think that's why Trump did it, because it's a quantifiable threat that he could actually carry out if they didn't do what he wanted. Because if you could just say, hey, you can have the same deal, the same whatever deal Denmark is giving you, we can give you, and we'll pay you. Does it hurt Greenland in any way? No, it doesn't.
Denmark, because they'll lose any chance of independence.
Well, Greenland is never. I'm sorry, but Greenland's never going to be independent.
I think they're independent now compared to what they would be if the U.S. were to take over fully.
I don't know. Billy Bob, what do you think?
Well, I if there is an independence movement, I would support, the independence movement. And if, 80% of Greenlanders are, indigenous and they were pushing for independence, I support them. I mean, I lived in Puerto Rico for like 3 years, and I know that most people on the island are happy with the status quo. You know, there's a small minority of people pushing for independence and not being part of the United States, but the United States has a way of, you know, brainwashing people, taking away the revolutionary spirit, and, you know, placating them with just enough, access to opportunity and material goods that, you know, they are not interested in, you know, having to, you know, have their own deal with their own sovereignty. So I don't know what it's like on Greenland. I would support, you know, Puerto Rican independence. I would support Greenland independence, Hawaiian independence. Like, I would support that. But again, you know, it's the people pushing for it are just such a minority at this point in time that it's. And again, I don't know the Greenland situation. If you know 80% are indigenous, and if 90% of them are pushing for independence, they should have independence. They should, you know, secede from Denmark, and they should, you know, the U.S. should keep their hands off. But ideally, China colonizes Greenland, and that would be the best. Okay, that's hyperbole, but no, it was funny because I saw somebody, you know, asking us China cucks, you know, how we feel that, you know, Trump stole Greenland from Xi, and I'm like, I don't think China was even involved in doing much on Greenland, except maybe trade.
I just Googled it. That's, like you said, is more. Greg was right. It's more. There's a lot more than I thought. He's right. 90% of Greenland's population is indigenous.
No, that's impressive. I mean, it kind of makes sense.
Well, the caveat is that their total population is around 57,000.
Yeah.
So it's not. It's like Jamestown, you know. It's not a place that's ever going to be, you know, realistically. You have to look at it realistically. There's every place that's going to be completely independent. I mean, if you want to, I mean, people want to be able to order stuff on Amazon, right? I mean, it's like, I want to be able to order IKEA furniture. And to do that, you need to be part of a larger economic union. It's just.
I mean, you can be sovereign and still have that. I mean, those aren't mutually
sovereign,
exclusive.
but you need to be a part of it. You need to be part of an economic union, like Belarus is with Russia. You need to be part of, like, I want to order IKEA furniture. I want to order, you know, a vase from China, or I want to order a lamp.
And certain strings are always attached when you become part of.
Yeah, I think Belarus and Greenland can get mail. It's defense that's their vulnerability.
Right. If you want to, I mean, if you want to hunt walruses and turn them into canoes and be completely off the grid and self-sufficient, that's possible. It's just, it's nicer to be a part of a larger economic union where you can, you don't have to make a lampshade out of walrus skin. You can just buy one on Amazon. That's the.
You know, in the liberal world that liberals deceitfully try to sell us, like, you know, you should be able to join an economic union and maintain your sovereignty, and you shouldn't have to worry about defending yourself. Of course, they would say you'd have to defend yourself from Russia and China, which is a joke. But yeah, no, that's not the real world. In the real world, if you want access to Western markets and Western trade goods, you have to be a vassal, and you have to subordinate, you know, your sovereign rights to whatever the empire, you know, tells you that they want from you. And if you don't do it, then you become targeted for regime change and, you know, dealt with in other ways. And so again, it's just, you know, there's two different, you know, worldviews. One is the liberal nonsense that they use to justify, you know, their rank imperialism. And then there's the other one that views, you know, all this liberal nonsense as an enabling mechanism of their imperialism. You know, it enables it. And so, that was something that I was dealing with all week on Facebook. You know, these two opposing worldviews, and AI. Of course, I was talking to AI a lot, and they have a lot of, you know, I mean, they're just immersed in the one worldview, which really, you know, can't escape this liberal, you know, the liberal ideology. You know, they're trapped in that. You know, that's how they're programmed. That's how AI is programmed, and so. it's interesting to discuss with them. And anyway, I learned a lot this week talking to AI. So what? Okay, so the overt way in which Trump is going about it, because it would be very easy. Like Trump could get every military base. He already has like 30 military bases on Greenland. Like there is nothing
Right,
he
and they're
couldn't
willing
get
to
from
give more.
Greenland that he wants. So the question is, why the theater? Why the overt? Just really in your face kind of rhetoric that is inflammatory to the citizens of the EU, inflammatory to Denmark, inflammatory to Canada. Like, why to do that? And again, I think the reason, all this is taking place and why, they're making such a big spectacle of it, because they want to present this idea of a split between, Europe and the United States. And I think this split, we're going to see why this split takes place, because I think, Trump is liable to crash the global economy and engage in some serious global shenanigans that are going to have disastrous consequences. And Western Europe doesn't want to be held accountable for these. They want to blame everything on Trump. And then once Trump does what he's supposed to do, then they're going to come behind him and everybody will blame Trump. But he will have done those very damaging things that they really need him to do, such as starting a real regime change war with Iran, getting control of Iranian oil, either by turning it into Libya, a failed state, or by putting in a puppet government, or by balkanizing it. I mean, so, and the same thing with resources in South America. Rubio's talking about, regime changing Cuba by the end of this year. So there's a lot of, what are these things called when you, there's a term for it. When you go around the planet engaging in aggressive militarism.
World policemen, interventionism. There's several different terms.
Yeah, no, there's several ways. But you know what I'm saying. So, I think that's what he's tasked with. And so I think we're going to just see a lot of that going on. And that kind of explains why he's trying to put this big rift between him and the European Union. But there are also legitimate, there's legitimate disagreements. And I mean, there's things that he's doing that the politicians don't like, but, I'm just not sure the politicians matter. Like, anyway, I had one more thing. What do you guys think about Carney's speech? Do you guys want to talk about that, or is there anything else?
Whose speech?
Sorry. So the Canadian Prime Minister's speech at Davos, where he kind of just
seen it. But we have a question from the commenters. Okay. Dust asked, Greg, can you explain taco? I don't know what that means, actually.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Trump always chickens out. I assume he's referring to how Trump didn't take Greenland.
Is that what that taco means? I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, no. So Taco Trump is an acronym. Trump always chickens out.
I'm in the wrong echo.
Every time you see Taco Trump, they're talking about Trump, talking a big game. Oh, we're gonna, collapse China because they're not doing what we want. And then, of course, China implements some measures and Trump backs down.
Well, okay. So I've said this. Greg, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean. Okay, Greg, you go first, because question is directed to you. You go first. What do you think?
I didn't even know Greg had something to say. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, not much more about Taco, but I always find myself thinking about Brian Berletic's theory that what the U.S. is doing towards Europe is turning it into the proxy because Ukraine is exhausted. So... Yeah. If we were going to divorce from Europe, why would we be ramping up their military spending so hard? And so, in a way, what this was a demonstration disciplining Europe, showing that Denmark had zero autonomy, sovereignty. If the U.S. wants Europe to do it, they're going to do it.
Yeah, so... No, that's a great point. And so Trump from the very beginning was always complaining about Europe getting a free ride, right? Europe has this welfare state. Their citizens have free health care and great benefits, retirement, and everything because the U.S. defends them, was what he was saying. U.S. is there defending them, and it's bullshit. Europe needs to pay their fair share, was Trump's constant refrain. And so, that is a very good point, which I agree with. So the point is to justify coming up with a narrative that justifies Europe trashing its welfare system, trading it in for military Keynesianism, right? And then being able to weaponize that threat against Russia and against China in this future conflict, assuming, Russia doesn't, throw China under the bus, which is Trump's biggest wet dream. So, no, that's definitely, what you can see take place. But again, I'm just saying that it's kind of, I don't really buy that Europe is opposed to it, right? Because I think the owners of Europe understand that this is the strategy. And I think, it's hard to say that they're not on board with it, right? But they need to be able to tell their people, to tell them a convincing narrative for why this needs to happen. And that's where that's where you can just blame everything on Trump. Well, Trump's, he's a jerk, and he's going to unleash Russia on us. And so we have to defend ourselves. Like, we're all alone now, no more United States. And so to me, this is the theater, and this is the creating of the narratives that are justifying these policies of, ending the welfare state and developing a militarism to be used, if necessary, as another proxy against Russia. Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to check that. I don't want, because I have several of these liberal mouthpieces in my, social media feed, and I think a lot of it is their emotion. So when you're very emotionally invested, someone's like your ex-wife. It's just like, my ex-wife is fat and ugly and smells bad. Just everything she does is bad, and I find some way to twist it around so it sounds bad. I think it's the same way with liberals and Trump. So I don't think it's good for national diplomacy, but I can look at what Trump does with his tariff wars, and I can understand the tactic. It's a logical tactic. It gets results, right? So you pick a country. And he's done this. He's done this individually. He's done this with Canada. He's done it with Mexico. It's several different countries. He's like, okay, we're going to introduce, 1,000% tariffs. It's going to cost, $100 to mail a box of toothpicks to the USA. And then that's essentially, it's a bluster to, it's not bluff, but it is bluster that is supposed to bring that country to the negotiating table. They give Trump whatever it was he wanted from that particular country. One thing that liberals tend not to mention is a lot of these countries do have tariffs against the USA, like, for example, Canada, which a lot of people didn't even know about until Trump started the tariff war with them. It's like I didn't even know Canada had such hostile tariffs against American goods. But he goes and he bullies them, and then they back down. And then the idea is they back down. They do whatever Trump wanted them to do, and then he doesn't actually impose those tariffs on them. I think the least successful country, I wouldn't call it completely unsuccessful, but the least successful country has probably been China, because they have the most weight, right? So other countries like Canada and Mexico are so dependent on the USA as trade partners, they just can't, like Mexico, because the reality of being Mexico or being Canada is that your largest trade partner is always going to be the USA. You can't change that. You just kind of have to go with the flow with what the USA wants. You don't have a choice. So China had more of a choice. I wouldn't call his bullying tactics with China completely unsuccessful, but they were less successful than with Mexico and Canada, and I guess now Denmark. So thank you, Greg. I had no idea what taco stood for until you said it, but I think it's a cope. I do think it's a cope by people who just have Trump derangement syndrome and just don't like Trump, and that's my take on it. What do you think, Greg? What do you think of what I just?
No, it's a real pattern. I mean, it's exploited by haters too, but it's a real phenomenon, I think.
Like, would you characterize what just happened with Denmark as Trump chickening out? What do you think?
Compared to what was promised, yeah. I mean, I was looking forward to, a summer vacation visa free in Greenland. I'm not getting it now, right?
It's not I mean, that is true. I mean, it's not Puerto Rico. It's not U.S. territory like Trump promised. That is
right.
a letdown.
Yet, apparently, I asked you guys if there was a deal that has been finalized, and we said no. So we don't know how it's going to end up. But yeah, it's so. I think a lot of it is theater, and I think they're ultimately going to decide on an agreement that is not going to be. It's not going to be part of the United States. I don't think. Because again, the theater can't have substance. Like, the theater needs to remain in the realm of theater, and it's going to have as little substance as possible, is my guess. And so, like, if it actually became part of the U.S., I mean, that's a substantive change that I'm not sure is going to happen. So I want to get back.
The angle Trump, like you said about the putting up the picture with the flag, there is an element of like his ego and personal quest for great legacy. I think that is in here somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, so no, we'll see. Like, I mean, does he really, is he willing to bear the risks and the consequences of annexing Greenland? And what would those risks be? Like, I mean, what is Europe really going to do about it? And again, ultimately, when there is a, when everybody is on pins and needles because there's a showdown between the United States and China, is the fact that the U.S. annexed Greenland going to keep Europe from siding with the United States? I don't think so. So we're gonna have to see. But I did like what I always like to have these discussions about ideologies and contrasting ideologies. And I think when Carney, spoke at Davos, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. I mean, he said a lot of things, Ian, which I want to read you just the gist, because I mean, it's just affirming what the worldview of people like me and Greg have always been saying for a long time. But it says, for decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institution, praised its principles, and benefited from its predictability. We could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false. Partially, it was totally false. That the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient. The trade rules were enforced asymmetrically, and that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. The fiction was useful, and American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window, we participated in the rituals, and largely avoid calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. So, of course, to me, these gaps between rhetoric and reality are very important. And so there's two views about these gaps. One view says, well, these gaps, we're trying, we try. We're moving incrementally forward. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And so that's one view, right? That's the view of most liberals in the United States and in the world. But I think the reality is these gaps between rhetoric and reality exist because the reality is that the rhetoric that's espoused is not really what they're after, right? What they're after is what they have, which is, control and power and, ownership over the resources, the markets, and the governments on the planet. And so as those things slip out of their hands, like, they have to become more and more invested in, straight power principles and worrying less and less about their rhetoric of respecting sovereignty, respecting the rule of law. Like, those things go out the window once what you're really interested in starts to slip out of your hands. But so I mean, to me and to AI too, because it's funny. So DeepSeek, all of its programming ended in 2024. So it lives in 2024 and it doesn't know anything that happens after 2024. So I put in these quotes by Carney. So I asked him, hey, what do you think the Prime Minister of Canada said at Davos this year? And he's like, oh, probably, support for the international order, support for Israel, support for Ukraine, and all all the.
I had that same problem with DeepSeek. You have to make sure the search internet function is on. Otherwise, it's forever trapped in 2024. I don't know why.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, DeepSeek told me that they couldn't access the internet, but maybe there's a
You have to. Are you using your phone or are you using internet browser on laptop? So you just have to make sure. I'll show you after the show. But yeah, it took me a while to figure that out. It's you have to make sure the internet function is turned on.
I think I might have posted that actually on my Facebook wall, what DeepSeek response was to the actual quote that I shared by Carney. And I didn't tell him it was Carney. I told him it was the Prime Minister of Canada, and DeepSeek just assumed it was Trudeau. So they kept referring to Trudeau's speech, and I didn't have the heart to tell him that, or tell her or they that Trudeau was on there. But no, I mean, they were kind of shocked, and they were like, AI was like, well, wow, it really reinforces, your worldview, which I'm always, arguing against AI. So, what are your, Greg, like, I mean, the significance, any significance at all to, Carney's admissions? Is it going to make a difference? I mean, is it going to help, the cause of justice, freedom, and reality? Or,
I mean, it could be why Trump decided to smash Denmark. That kind of, rumblings from.
Did you hear what? Did you hear? I swear to God, like Trump sounded like a mafia don. Like he was talking in this voice, and he was just threatening Canada. Like Canada needs to think twice before they talk like that. I mean, it was like right out of a movie. And so again, I mean, this is just so overt and on purpose and in our face.
And then Canada went to China, right? They sent somebody to China.
Yeah, and they're like, and so you see this playing out, and the question is, what part of it is real, what part of it is theater, and to what ends? Like, what is really going on? And so again, I just can't help but take it all with a huge grain of salt. And I mean, we'll watch it play out.
Something's changing that's real. I mean, the U.S. is becoming more aggressive all around. And it's creating, China trips from Canada who had, turned against China decisively following us, like 10 years ago. So, I mean, I think in some ways what we're seeing now is Trump trying to control the damage from the first year, which is some of the allies are getting upset.
So some of the allies are getting upset at Trump's behavior, you're saying?
Yeah, the trade stuff particularly is violate. You're not supposed to have trade wars against your allies. This is, I mean, there've been little bits of it here and there, but it was always within our rules-based order.
And so they're responding by turning to China or threatening to turn to China. Yeah, no, I mean, you see that, and you see, a trade deal where Chinese EVs are going to be, allowed into Canada now, where before they weren't. And I mean, but what do you think about my assertion that this will probably not amount to too much, and it's more of a psychological thing to get people to blame the person of Trump for all these things, and then when Trump's out of here, it's going to be very easy for everything to go back to normal and a united front against China. Only by then you'll have, hopefully, according to from their perspective, you'll have control of Iran, you'll have control of Venezuela, you'll have a militarized Europe.
I mean, you could say, that Biden started destroying the rules-based order actually by his behavior towards Russia, confiscating capital, cutting Europe off from free trade and energy. So Europe's been already kind of bristling under this quietly. Now it's gotten loud and ugly.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we're going back to treating them like we used to, just because the U.S. conditions getting more desperate.
Well, The optics. So again,
Yeah,
there's
the
a
optics are
reality.
way
The
worse.
reality doesn't change. There's a strategy, and that strategy is being really pursued by all the successive governments, including Obama and then Biden and Trump. And that strategy is there's a continuity of strategy, but then the optics are part of that strategy too, and the optics change. And I can definitely see Trump leaves office, and the optics go right back to everybody's shaking hands. But by that time, they're hoping that Trump has changed and shaped the battlefield significantly, such that Western Europe is spending a whole lot more on defense, a whole lot less on their working class, right? And Iran is a regime change. You have total regional domination of the Middle East, and same with the governments in Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua. So I think Trump is really quickly trying to shape this battlefield. And because when he leaves, that's when you're going to really see the pivot to China. It could also happen under Trump. I mean, the pivot could happen under Trump. But I just don't see enmity past, once Trump leaves office. I don't see an enmity. I see a unified Western front optically after Trump.
I mean, like Ian was saying, the U.S. war against Europe arguably got really bad starting with Biden. And
Biden
Trump
blew
hasn't
up
done
Nord
anything
Stream.
Yeah, right. And the sanctions cutting Europe off from Russian energy has been devastating.
Yeah, and that's the continuity of agenda. The agenda, but Biden.
But it also breaks, the post-war norms of free trade. I mean, the European purchasing of Russian energy goes back to the 60s, right? When the Soviet Union was there. So, I mean, even in the Cold War, the U.S. didn't do this.
So, yeah, the Soviet Union was exporting energy during the Cold War to Europe, Western Europe, not just their satellite states. No, that's interesting.
We have a question from Squidots that I'd like to address.
Okay, yeah, I just read that. That's interesting.
I don't think I switched on Trump. Maybe Squidots could elaborate on that, but maybe Billy, Bob, or Greg, maybe you flipped on Trump.
Well, yeah, no, Greg used to be full-on pro-Trump. He would attend MAGA rallies. He was back on January 6th.
He had his hat, right? He bought a hat. He used to wear that hat on the show.
Right. Yeah. Just a couple weeks ago.
I think Skoidat is misunderstanding, our position, and definitely my position and Greg's position. Well, yeah, I don't know if he's accusing Greg of switching positions, but I don't think I've switched positions. No, look, I am, reality is complicated. I champion truth, definitely. What the Democrats tried to do to Trump during Russiagate was preposterous, and I was calling the Russiagate hoax out from the very beginning. And it was definitely, they weren't ready for Trump. It wasn't Trump's turn. And I think had Trump gone in, there might not have been a war in Ukraine. Like the strategy might have been different. The strategy for global domination might have been entirely different. And definitely, I think if Trump wouldn't have won the first time, I think Hillary would have pushed for the Ukraine war a lot earlier. And then Trump won, and that delayed the Ukraine war, which started under Biden. And then, so I think, I think they were trying to sequence this strategy. And I think, any defense of Trump, was it not a defense of him? Like, I would never vote for Trump. I don't, support Republicans or Trump's policy. Like, you got to understand, like, it's hard for liberals to get it. They think if you, champion truth and Trump has to be saying something that's true, then you support Trump. And it's just, it's a little bit more complicated and nuanced than that. Daryl Cowley has interesting statement here about Carney. Sister-in-law Tanya Rother went to school, and Leslie was roomies with the Maxwell sisters. So he's bringing in, I guess, Ghislaine and Epstein and that kind of stuff. Yeah, no, he's definitely a banker, and Goldman Sachs, and of course, these people, that they're all in the network. Like there's the global elites, and they're all part of the same clique. And so, one would be surprised if you get a bus driver to be the prime minister of Canada. No, they're going to be the bankers, they're going to be the lawyers, they're going to be the connected, wealthy elites that have gone to the private schools and run in those circles. I mean, that's just how reality works. Except in socialist countries where you can actually get a bus driver, to be your prime minister. I'm not accusing you of anything. I was just wanted clarity because I thought I heard very different things coming out from at least Billy Bob. He's clearing things up right now. Appreciate it. Okay. Well, we've always invited you on. I know you have to work typically when we broadcast.
Well, Squiddat's always on this show. We can even make a special show for him for his work. We can pick Squiddat. You can pick a day that you don't have work and you are free, and you can talk to us. We would love to have you on. You can message me or Billy Bob. We can make an arrangement for you.
For sure. Squiddat also asks, do you all think Trump is a fascist yet? I'll go first. I think he's a fascist, although the U.S. is not a fully fascist state yet at this point. Some kind of proto-fascism, I would say.
What I mean, is there a succinct definition? It's so like this is the thing when we start throwing around labels, because I'm liable to agree, but then with certain label of fascism, like I would disagree. So what's your succinct definition? If you're prepared to give me one, and then I can agree or disagree if Trump is a fascist or not.
Well, for the U.S., I think it's not, which is one discussion. I mean, Trump seems to have a lot of those tendencies himself, personally.
So, I mean, fascist is just kind of unrestrained by the rule of law, and really aggressively going after, the interests of the ruling elite without any regard whatsoever for the pretend norms and the pretend rule of law, like in a way that normally doesn't happen so overtly under regular liberalism. So you can see kind of like liberalism on one end of the spectrum and fascism on the other. They're both in service of the same oligarch class, but their methods and approach are different. And you can get more fascisty or more liberally depending on, how aggressively you pursue your interests. I mean, I don't know.
There's a liberal definition, which, is more or less about a nasty right-wing type of dictatorship, right? That is racist and demonizes enemies of the state. And then, the Marxist definition adds that it's a particular thing capitalist countries do under crisis as a last resort, kind of. So.
Yeah, and so I could definitely see things heading in that direction because I do believe that the United States is in a crisis, and it's the crisis of a peer competitor on the global stage, and that's their big crisis, and that's really what is animating all of these really fast-moving things that are going on everywhere. Venezuela, Iran, Ukraine, Greenland. This rhetoric that's coming out like. They're all being animated because of this, peer competitor on the global stage that they don't have an answer for. They don't know how to deal with China. They have a vague plan, and they're trying to work towards, pulling the trigger on that plan of embargo and, cutting China off from exports and imports, maritime imports and exports, with their ring, around the Philippines and all the missile forces. Anyway. So I think that's the big picture on the planet that we're dealing with right now. And people need to keep that big picture in mind because Again, that's the context within which all these other things are taking place. And I think what's going on with Iran, what's going on with Venezuela, that's kind of shaping the global battlefield in preparation for a showdown, with China. And then the question is, who's going to be on China's side, and how that plays out. And I think Trump is actively continuing consistently to try and be nice to Russia in the hopes that in a showdown with China, Russia will either stand down or at least not side with China overtly. And I think this is the impetus behind him, being mean to Zelensky, trashing Ukraine. This is what's going on in Trump's mind. And so, you guys agree with that or disagree? Disagree?
I tend to think China's further and further down the road.
Well, I mean, that doesn't. I think that's agreeing with what I'm saying. I think China.
Yeah, it's not disagreeing. I just think it's this is less understandable through a China lens. A lot of this to me. I mean, China's out there, but it's not immediately assembling for the war. I don't think.
Okay, well, how about this? Like, I mean, there's been decades and decades and decades where we've managed Iran and where Iran has been allowed to exist under sanctions. And all of a sudden, it seems like, well, and maybe you disagree with this, but it just seems like, the United States is preparing for a real regime change effort with Iran that is liable to cut energy exports from the Middle East and really be devastating to the global economy. And previously, this has always been a deterrent, right? The United States has not wanted to do that, and they've been deterred by this threat. But now it seems like I'm kind of convinced that it's pretty soon that's no longer a deterrent, and the United States is going to do this. And the question is why? And my answer is because China. That's why. That's what's changed. Like China. Do you disagree with that?
Yeah, I'm inclined to think we don't want the Strait of Hormuz closed because it would hurt us and our allies a lot too. And Brian Berletic says the shift in terms of Iran is because Syria's gone now. That's what makes attacking them possible. But we would try to prevent it from getting to that point. And Trump's inclination would be for a short war, not one where Iran would escalate to that. Because that's, their nuclear weapon.
No, for sure. But again, I mean, can you imagine another conflict in Iran that does not try to assassinate the Ayatollah or decapitate the regime? And if they try and assassinate the Ayatollah and decapitate the regime, can you imagine Iran not blocking the Strait of Hormuz? You do? Okay.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, I mean, last
right.
time they did. We did, right? Israel was explicitly trying to decapitate them. I mean, maybe if it's us, it'll be different doing it.
They didn't go after the Ayatollah.
Yeah, they did.
And did they try to kill him, you think? Maybe.
Yeah, Trump even threatened him. But Israel explicitly said they were trying to hit him.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean,
Iran's
if that's
pretty
true,
conservative. They're not big risk takers.
No, for sure. But if they feel that their country is under a real threat, like it's their deterrent. And so, yeah, no, it is a nuclear option and it's a last resort. But again, it just seems that the 12-day war, why would the United States want to repeat the 12-day war? So my thinking is that the United States is prepared and willing to enter into a conflict that will regime change Iran. That's the only purpose they would do it. And it seems like there's a buildup right now. And Fridays are always a good day for military operations, right? Like I've talked about this. And so I predicted on a Friday we would do whatever we were going to do against Venezuela. Of course, I was a few Fridays in front of it. I never actually predicted, but it did happen on a Friday because that gives them the weekend to do what they need to do, stabilize the stock market. And so it could be this Friday. It could be 4 Fridays from now, but probably on a Friday, we're going to see an effort by the United States to regime change. And I don't think it's going to be like it was on the 12-day war. Like it's going to be different. And I think Iran is going to respond differently. And I just don't think that, they're not, I'm not certain they're not going to use their nuclear option, because they're going to see the threat as a real dire threat. But maybe not. I mean, we could have another short war. Doesn't regime change them, and they don't use the nuclear option. But to me, it's like, well, why would the U.S. want to do that? Like they've already done that. They want to do the coup de grace. They want the government out of there, and they probably want to balkanize it, right? They want to flood it. They want to have a safe haven for the Kurds who are not doing so well in Syria. They want to create Baluchistan in Iran, and many different ethnic regions is what they're after creating. And so, is Iran going to let that happen without using their deterrent, without, engaging in the deterrence, which they have always, threatened? But we'll see.
I mean, the U.S. and Israel have supposedly very depleted air defenses. So I think if the U.S. does a war, it'll be because it thinks it can do it quickly again, for whatever reason.
What are the objectives, though? To regime change, right?
Yeah.
And it's got to involve an insurgency in the country. It's got maybe involve certain, militaries invading Iran and trying to hold territory.
I mean, it could be half-assed, like Venezuela too. I mean, opportunistic, persuaded by Israel or some other.
Yeah, no, I mean, it could be, but you just wonder, like, they just did that. Why would they do the same thing again for, what's the purpose? But it could be a war of attrition. We could see 10 of these. We could see 10 12-day wars, over the next 4 years or 3 years or 2 years, just to continue the pressure. I mean, what is Iran going to do? No, that's a possibility.
I think if there was going to be American action, because Trump, those possible kinetic solutions, as they like to call them, that Trump was briefed on, I think they would have happened within the first 3 days of those riots. So I think he was briefed on them, but they saw that the necessary internal chaos necessary for those solutions to work weren't materializing, so they decided against it. I think that should be very clear by now. If they were going to do it, they would have done it by now. So I don't think.
Supposedly, though, there was no aircraft carrier there, which should be arriving, I think, today.
Yeah, no, and the strato tankers, the refueling aircraft, like all of those things have just been shipped over there very recently. And yeah, I think the aircraft carrier arrived today from wherever it was.
The comments that the riots were certainly premeditated. I don't think they came by surprise. So
no, I think they were spontaneous. I don't think the U.S. could schedule the protests. I think we scheduled the stress that Iran was under and knew they would come sooner or later. But
no, that's interesting. I would side with Ian that like these were not spontaneous, and they were, somebody pressed a button to start them. Is my thinking.
Well, there might have been some organic unhappiness because there is high inflation, there is high food prices. There might have been some organic protests that people
a bank failed, and there was some stuff recently that the snapback sanctions hit in September.
But they have the means. I think without the carrier group, they had the means to start something, and they chose not to. That's interesting, though. I think there was a reason because Trump was very enthusiastic about the idea of striking Iran, then he suddenly wasn't. So we have to wonder why that was.
Right. And I remember Miss Lindsay.
The Starlink is supposedly the surprise that threw him. The Starlink shut down.
They didn't know. And who knows? Maybe those riots would have been more successful had they not been able to shut down Starlink. But yeah, I remember Lindsey Graham was so distraught. He was so sad. But he's
After
like, we
being
gotta go
manic,
big.
not sleeping for days.
It's diabolical. So I've been having an interesting dialogue with Daryl on my page. Just we're disagreeing over the nature of the ruling establishment, and I think Daryl speaks for a lot of people, not the majority for sure, but there's a lot of people who kind of think that the dynamic, there's an ethnic dynamic to imperialism and and specifically the United States policies towards Israel. And it's an interesting discussion, and I hate to kind of engage it without having Daryl here to defend himself. But so no, he's making the point that we're decades of intervention in the Middle East and Africa on behalf of foreign nation. We deport people critical of Israel policy. We pass laws, like anti-Semitism laws. And so I understand the point Daryl's making, but I disagree with his conclusion, right? So I see all those things too, and it's definitely true. Like all of those things exist, but our difference is that those things don't exist against the will of the non-Jewish majority who comprise the oligarch class, the ownership class. And so those things all happen with the tacit approval of the entirety of the oligarchy. And so it's not like you have a rogue element that is able to dominate the majority and overrule what they want with impunity and force all these policies that are opposed by the ruling class majority. I don't see that. But no, Daryl, I would, if you want to discuss this, like, I'm more than happy to have a friendly discussion on this topic, because I know a lot of people, and I don't think it's appropriate to to attack people personally if they have been convinced that this is the thing, because I know a lot of liberals do that, right? They'll just call you an anti-Semite, racist, and they'll say you do not need to be platformed, you need to be shut up. But I think that rational people can have a rational discussion, and and it's only going to be productive as you and I are intelligent. And if you and I approach it in an unintelligent way, it won't be productive. If we approach it an intelligent way, it'll be productive. But anyway, we definitely disagree on the conclusions. And I mean, we see the same things, but we conclude different things about them. So it could be an interesting discussion. If you're up for it, let me know. Greg, what are your thoughts? Any on that issue or other issues?
I think the framing is backwards. We're the empire, Israel's a colony dependent on the U.S. Totally. And the reason Marxists don't like anti-Semitic conspiracy theories is they basically scapegoat Jews for capitalism.
Yeah. No, exactly. What was the first thing you said? Because I was going to respond to that.
First thing I said was he has the relationship backwards.
Yeah. No, and so that's
the U.S. isn't doing on behalf of Israel, but the opposite.
Yeah, and Israel is beneficial to the entirety of the ruling class. They're not just beneficial to the Jewish oligarchs. They're not just beneficial to tribalistic people who think tribalistically. Like they are beneficial to the entirety of the ruling class, including the non-Jewish majority, and that's why they have bipartisan support. That's why there's no oligarchs out there, denouncing Israel and railing against Israel. But Daryl's objection to that, and I know because we've had this discussion, is, well, look at Elon Musk. Elon Musk was, confused why they're all this anti-Israel censorship, and the next thing you know, Elon Musk is kissing the wall. And so, I understand that, but I still don't think Elon Musk's kissing the wall necessarily means that, you have a Jewish minority that is running roughshod over a non-Jewish majority and doing things against their will. I don't think that necessarily follows.
With
But yeah,
with Elon Musk, it was really interesting because I don't remember what tweet it was, but I remember he was on X. It was after October 7th, and he'd shared some slightly anti-Semitic joke. And I remember there was this deluge of like Netanyahu and all these Israeli people are saying you're anti-Semitic, and Elon Musk actually flew to Israel, and they made him do the whole, like you said, made him kiss the wall, made him look at the shoes. They love the shoes. They made him look at the shoes. And then after that, it was like Elon Musk was almost a different person after that, because he was never like, I never remember Elon, correct me if I'm wrong, I never remember Elon Musk being like pro-Israel, like I love Israel, Israel's important. But after that, he was. It was very
So so there's two conclusions we can draw from your narrative. And then conclusion one is that the Jewish minority is just so powerful they can threaten people into submission and compliance. Or, Elon Musk did something against his own best interest, and people explained to him, no, look, here's the thing. Your best interest is to do this. And it's I guess this might be a nuanced thing, but again, Israel definitely serves a beneficial function for Western imperialism, including, the non-Jewish majority stakeholders in that system. And so it just doesn't make any sense at all for Elon Musk to start a war with a very powerful faction within the oligarchy. And so, he probably realized he was stupid for doing that. And, he made amends. And so to me, it doesn't prove or demonstrate that, it's everything is being driven by Jewishness. Like, it's capitalism. It's the oligarchy. It's the Western capitalist class that are, controlling and driving events as they pursue their class interests. So like Greg was saying, to look at it in ethnic terms or racial terms really does scapegoat the entirety of the class, and they love that. The non-Jewish majority must love it when the workers aren't smart enough to figure out who to blame for the fuckery, and they want to just blame, and then guess who gets blamed? It's not the oligarch Jews, it's the Jews on the street who then get attacked with anti-Semitism, or they get their synagogues shut up. So it's reality is complex, it's nuanced, and it takes discussions, and it takes parsing, and it takes thoughtfulness. And so I really appreciate you guys entertaining me and joining me for these discussions. I know it's really tough. Like, man, I pull my hair out trying to entice people I disagree with to have a dialogue. And man, it's just amazing how averse people are to dialogue and to disagreeing with having a disagreement. And I don't know, there's probably many reasons, and many different reasons, and different people have different reasons for not being interested in discussion. But I think it's important, and I think especially considering the complexity of reality, I mean, we really just need to spend our time and think and talk about it. What else do you guys think we need to hit on? I feel like we haven't done a program for a while, and so I'm definitely not trying to end our program today. Yeah, good point, Dust. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Any stimulating topics? Greg, I know you had brought up pre-show the kind of talking about how Russia has done a disservice to itself by kind of reducing the size of its Navy and its Navy shipbuilding capacity. I mean, that was a pretty interesting take, and it might be a legitimate criticism. What is your angle on that?
Ian may know more about how it happened, but from what I researched, Russia kept up most of their ground forces, air force, nuclear deterrent, submarine fleet, but kind of they had over 1,000 ship navy at the end of the Soviet Union, and seemingly let most of their blue water surface ships just go. So I think it's hard for them if they wanted or needed to start escorting shipping to deal with all the seizing and sabotaging and attacking of their tankers, as
So,
well as support allies
Ian,
like,
did you want to jump in
Venezuela and
before I
Cuba.
diatribe, because he's triggered a lot of
So I think the issue, so you're referring to that one, I mean, there were, I think, 2 tankers, but the main one that temporarily took on the Russian flag on the hopes that that would dissuade the USA from seizing it. Is that am I correct in what, that's what you're referring to? Yes? Okay.
Yeah, that's what, got
So,
me
I mean,
curious.
I read Russian media, and the Substack article that I linked in the description to this live stream is my Russian media report that I do 2 or 3 times a week that gives an English version of what Russian language media is talking about. Not even like RT English, like I look at actual Russian language social media and news, because it's different. What people say amongst themselves is different than what they present to external audiences. So in this, there was a lot of unhappiness among Russian people, because this ship, it did have Russian citizens. It had the crew apparently was several Russians, several Ukrainians. I think the owner of the ship was a Jewish guy from Odessa, is what Russians were saying. So it wasn't. So it was just a bunch of different people, and they had asked. They knew they were in trouble. It was an empty ship. It was leaving Venezuela to refuel somewhere, and it was asking.
Yeah. So that was. Go ahead.
So the idea was they asked for the protection of the Russian flag. And so Russians were disappointed that this Russian flagship was seized by the Americans. But my argument for that is, well, that says more about America than it does about Russia, because, I mean, what were they supposed to do? Were they supposed to attack the Russian ships, or excuse me, the American ships? Were they supposed to shoot at the American ships, declare war on the USA because they seized this tanker that was owned by a guy in Odessa with several Russians and Ukrainian and maybe some African, some this multinational crew. Were they supposed to declare war over that? Well, probably not. I did write an article about several weeks ago saying that I don't think this means every civilian ship is going to be escorted, but I think there's going to be retaliation. I think it's if America escalates in this, we could see other nations. We could even see smaller nations like Yemen, Cuba, maybe, anybody who can afford a naval drone to start retaliating because we have this mutual understanding that that neutral civilian shipping in international waters is safe from being molested by when you're in international waters, you're a civilian ship, you're not going to be harassed by anybody. And especially under Trump, we've seen that idea erode. I mean, it's always kind of true. I mean, because I've read in the news for years, decades even, that of the USA seizing Venezuelan or Iranian ships, but it's especially escalated under Trump. And I could see that idea of free trade just eroding. And we could go back even to the 17th century. We could not even into the 19th century. You could push back to the 17th century, where you just had privateers under different flags, just sinking, not necessarily seizing ships, but if you have a drone, you can just damage a ship. You can destroy its rudder. You can just make it dead in the water, so it's not going to get where it was trying to go. You could really see an end to the world order on the basis of free trade, of unmolested international trade by sea.
Right. Well, that one of the articles you linked to in your last one on this pointed out how this never did or would happen to a Soviet ship. So they were feeling it as a sign of reduced status that this happened to a Russian flagship for the first time.
That was on one of the links in Ian's article
that's in the description of the video.
Put in the description of this video. So the context of this is that, the United States has developed a strategy to play to its strengths, right? So one of the strengths of the United States military is its Navy, and it has really allowed a global order where, logistics and maritime supply chains are pretty much unmolested. And so the United States is leveraging that power. They are saying, hey, this doesn't have, we don't, we can flip the script and we can start, going after those countries that don't do what we say. And we will do this because we have the power to do it. And so part of the problem is they do have the power to do it because Russia, does not have the blue water Navy nearly as capable and large as the United States does. And the same is true of China. And so this is part of the strategy, and you see it escalating. So Ian, you brought up this tanker that happened a long time ago, but I think there's been Russian flag. I think there was a Russian flag tanker seized yesterday or the day before. Like there's been, this is escalating, and not only are they being, they're continuing. Now, I think that it was like 6,000 tankers are involved in exporting Russian energy. And so, you think of one or two and it's kind of insignificant, but over months and over years, if you start escalating the number that you go after, it can have a problem, and it definitely has a psychological effect. And so the question is, how is Russia going to deal with this asymmetrical warfare, this strategy by the United States to, coerce and threaten them? What are they going to do in response? And so right now it's rather insignificant. But you can see that going forward, Russia needs to figure out how they're going to respond. And, I'm glad, it's a very difficult thing to respond to. And so I'm not sure what their plan is. But you mentioned drones, defensive drones, and that's definitely an option. But, yeah, in the Soviet Union, they wouldn't have done that. They didn't do that to the Soviet shipping. And so, draw whatever conclusions you want from that. But yeah, definitely ending this free trade as we know it, the freedom of navigation as we know it. This is definitely the new normal that Trump is plunging us into. And again, I say Trump because, it's a strategy and a tactic. And I think it's a strategy and a tactic aimed at dealing with their peer competitor. And I think ideally, once they deal with their peer competitor, they will negotiate and they'll try and do a return to normalcy. But in the interim, they're definitely moving away from life as we know it, and they're creating a new normal where you don't have this freedom of navigation, and that's going to definitely be the new normal. And we'll see for how long that lasts. But that's the trend that we're heading towards.
Yeah. I mean, I think Russia in the 90s assumed this freedom of navigation was here to stay, as well as, most of Europe barely has a navy too. And this is like a worldwide phenomenon, except for the U.S.
And imagine, Russia does a tit for tat. Like imagine how the West would seize on that and use it, to further escalate. They'll just seize on it for propaganda purposes. Like, if Russia just says, okay, well, we're going to mess with this U.S. tanker, I mean, it would be there would be an outrage. And so Russia can't do that. But, it'll be interesting to see what their asymmetrical response is to this asymmetrical warfare being waged against them. I know they'll come up with something. Okay, hour and 30 minutes in. Ian, any other issues you can think of? How's
No,
Spaz?
I think we hit everything we meant to cover in this channel, in this show.
Except for your pets.
My pets. Well, my pets are sleeping right now. They're good. I will say, if you go, I would like people to subscribe to that Substack, and also, if you go through that Substack or my blog, readingjunkie.com, you will see my Amazon links. If you buy crap on Amazon through one of my web
That's right.
banners, I get a cut of it, and that's good because it helps pay for.
So when you make your Amazon purchases, go through Ian's link, and Bezos will not get 100% of the profits. He will share his profits with Ian. We all shop on Amazon. I've bought a few things through those links, but yeah, no, it's hard to remember. So thank you for the reminder. And then I think Tuesday we have the Indomitable. Is that a good word? Indomitable. Max Perry. Max Perry recently ran a large article on 9/11 and the history of 9/11. I have yet to read it, but I will read it before next Tuesday. And he said he promised to join us on Tuesday, so I'm looking forward to that. But thank you, Greg. Thank you, Ian. We will reconvene next week for episode 184. Okay, bye.
Thanks for having me, Billy.
Take care.